Hey, so just before I start the tutorial, I wanted to share a big thanks to you guys for watching my videos, and I'm really excited to start putting more stuff out here. I'm actually traveling next month to shoot for a few brands, including Siri. I'm going to be testing the 85mm f1.4 Aurora lens. This is really exciting, I can't wait to use this one. And I'm also shooting some stuff for PGY Tech. I have a camera backpack down here, and that's geared towards more outdoorsy people. Today we're going to be focusing on Dehancer. I've been using this plugin for about a month now, so I've been able to test it on a few different things, including portrait shoots and when I was traveling. I'm by no means a colorist, but I have been able to teach myself using YouTube and other creators like Sir and Gork, so really big inspirations for me. So I wanted to show you some of the features that Dehancer has to offer and how easy it is actually to color grade with it. So grab a snack or a drink and let's dive into DaVinci. Okay, so here are the two clips we're going to be editing today. Let's head over to the color tab for the first one. You'll want to go down to Dehancer and just drag and drop that onto a node. You can see we've already got this kind of default look. You want to disable this by going down to Options, Disable Tools, and now let's head up to the Input tab. So you can create a CST beforehand if you'd like to convert it to one of these sources, but I wanted to show you that you can actually just choose the camera now and select whichever camera that you have. I use the Sony A7 IV, and I shot in S-Log3 sgamut3.cine. So here's the kind of converted look that we've got. I just wanted to mention before we get started some of the characteristics of the lens. So you can see that it's quite soft. I kind of missed focus, I guess here. I was shooting at perhaps f1.8, and we have this kind of hazing or bloominess to the highlights here. So that's what we're working with. Let's bring down the exposure a little bit, just to make this a bit better, something like this. I'm also going to create a node beforehand just to target those highlights a little bit better on her face. It's also worth mentioning, if you go down to print here, we have an exposure option here. So if you have a look at this, if I bring this up and have a look at the highlights, and then if I was to do that on the input tab, you can see we have quite blown out highlights here. So I'd like to think of this as a kind of surgical tool, and then your print here is a kind of characteristic tool. So let's bring it to something I'm happy with. Before we go any further, let's choose a film profile. So I'm going to choose the Fujifilm option for this one, as I really like the tones it has in the coat here as well as the hair. I'm going to also bring in the analog range limiter as well. This creates a floor and a ceiling to your blacks and your whites to obviously emulate that kind of film look. And yeah, that looks really great. Let's bring it down a tad. I'm going to come up and choose the film profile. So if I press enable here, and you can see we have a ridiculous amount of options here to choose from. I am going to choose the Kodak Ultra Max for this one. And I'm going to bring it down so I get those cooler tones in the coat again. It'd be great to see a global bend on this in an update, but I understand if it's kind of staying true to how you might shoot with film, you don't have that option. So yeah, that would be great to have in the future. So let's move down to Film Developer. As you can see, that took away quite a lot of the color, so I want to reintroduce that using the color boost. So this is a kind of overall saturator. As you can see, I can very quickly break the image using this. So I'm going to bring it down to something around about here. And then I'm also going to use the other options in film compression and print. We have color density here and color density here. So if I turn this on, have a look at the highlights on the face and the background. It just compresses that again to emulate film, and we can control the impact, the white point and the tonal range here to dial in something that we're happy with. And then I can bring in the color density here, and it's about kind of playing with the color density and the color boosts. Let's have a look at the lips here. That really brings back the color very nicely without destroying it too much. Something like that. is pretty good. So let's move down to expand, so you can change your white and your black point here. I wanted to have a bit more of a contrasty look, have a bit more black in the coat there, and we can brighten up the whites a tad. So again, you kind of keep going back and forth, adjusting as you introduce other parameters. So something like that is pretty nice. I can also come back to the highlights and make sure I have that detail on her face. Moving down, we have the color head. So this is great. It's similar to the color wheels. Let's bring in a little bit more of a cooler look. Again, focusing on having that kind of bluey look to the coat. I really like that. And then a little bit of green there as well, and a bit more warmth. What's great about this is we can use the tones here to really balance things out. So I wanted to have those blue tones on the coat, I can just bring that back, and vice versa with this, to have a bit warmer look on her face and her hair, but have that cooler look on the coat. Great. Let's move on to the effects. So we have the film grain. By default, you've got the 35mm. I'm going to choose the ISO 50. We're obviously shooting in daylight, so we wouldn't naturally have that much grain, but it's really nice to help with the image here and the overall look. So if you have a look, if I bring this all the way down to 0, we still get a bit of grain, so just be aware of that. You can come into custom and you have a few different options here, so I could bring up the resolution and change the size a bit as well to something I'm a bit more happy with. Something like that is pretty nice. Let's move over to Halation. I also wanted to mention this one because if I enable it, we actually get a bit more red in the whole image, so just be aware of that. This image itself probably doesn't really need halation, but let's just play around with it. So you can combat that red by changing the hue a little bit and obviously bringing down the amplify and diffusion. Something like that is pretty nice. Okay, so going on to bloom. As I mentioned, we're using this old lens, so we do have some blooming, but let's play around with this. Let me bring that on. You can obviously see it around the higher areas. If you have a look at her eye though, we do get some detail dropping out. So what I can do is go into custom and bring back those details a bit, bring back the diffusion, and just play around with that until I'm happy. That's pretty nice. So let's talk about some other features we've got. I personally don't use these ones too much, but it's worth mentioning. We have the film damage to create these artifacts, scratches and such. You can customize it and you have a bunch of different options here, so you can really go crazy and mess around with it if you'd like. I'm going to disable that. We have film breath and gate weave to introduce that kind of movement that you might get when shooting on film. Again, not going to use that for this. But I did want to show you the overscan. So a lot of people ask about how I create those rounded borders. This is a really great way of doing that. I didn't have Dehancer at the point of making those videos, so I was using the film look creator from DaVinci, which you get on the studio version. You can also use overlays if you have the free version, but this has a few more options to choose from. So if you have a look at the borders here, as you play the video, you would actually get this kind of animation as it's moving, so that's really cool. And we have obviously a bunch of different options from gate types, shapes and so on to really customize your overscan. So that's really great. Let's take it off for now. We also have Vignette. I personally like to use the power windows. You get a bit more control over that, but it's worth mentioning that we have here, you can mask and really dial in things. I personally think it's still a little bit intense. If you have a look, is a bit too much, but what is great is you can obviously create a positive exposure. So if you're using a variable ND or something where you get that vignetting, you can combat that here, which is really great. So last thing I wanted to mention is the LUT generator. I recently picked up a monitor Shimbol sent me, which I find really useful. I used it for this shoot actually and created a similar LUT, which helps kind of spark inspiration, where you can kind of already see a look that you're gonna go for in post. So that was really great. I don't have a camera that previews those LUTs in camera like the FX3, so using a monitor was great for this. You can obviously disable the input transform so you can use it across different cameras. So yeah, that's a really cool feature to instantly create LUTs. Worth mentioning that you don't get any of these effects obviously, but you do get all of these other options like the prints and the profiles. So let's move over to the second clip. I won't run you through everything again, but I did create a look here that you might be interested in. So as I mentioned, when I was filming this, I didn't have Dehancer. I was using the film look creator, but I wanted to create a look that I was happy with. So I chose the Portra 400. It's a recipe that I used with my Fujifilm camera a lot when I was there. So I wanted to recreate something similar. So here, just a few surgical adjustments to the temperature and the exposure, and then introducing the film profile as well as the print. So for this one I used the 2383, and again a few adjustments here, changing the target white to be a bit more neutral, and that's pretty much it. Introducing the range limiter again as well, a bit more contrast. So let's go back up to the top here. I used the film developer to bring back those colors and also decrease some saturation and gamma to create that softer look that I was going for. Same with the film compression. This was a mega help when it came to shooting in things like snow, where we get these really harsh white reflections, and that just helps create that compression and just has a more pleasing look to the eye. I find that really useful. That was great. Moving on to the expand, just minor adjustments to bring back the brightness of that white after crushing it with the compression. And then with the color head, I wanted to introduce that slight kind of green look and change the hue of the blues a bit as well to give it a bit of an older look. So I ended up with that, and that looks really great. I used a bit of film grain as well, as you can see, just to take away some of the sharpness of the image. It creates nice textures in the background there as well. Halation I also used. Again, it creates that slight red cast over everything, and that seemed to work with the look that I wanted. I didn't actually have too much halation. I personally don't like the look that I created beforehand where I had too much halation, so I wanted to make sure I didn't do that again. But if you have a look around my body, we do have some of the blooming coming out, which again just makes everything a bit softer. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and walkthrough of Dehancer. If you have any other questions about it, please let me know in the comments. And if you are interested, there is a trial version with a watermark on it, I think for about a week. But if you do want to buy it, you can use the link in my description for 10% off. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. I'll see you in the next. Peace.